Can they deliver? That's the question that I and many players had after watching everything about Crimson Desert. This game is going to be released in about 2 weeks, and this is going to be an open world, single player action RPG, and from everything we've seen so far, this game looks pretty much ambitious. A huge world, a wide range of different mechanics, fun encounters, boss fights, exploration, and multiple systems interacting with each other. There's clearly a lot of things going on here, and this is great, but the real question is, are all of these systems going to come together in a meaningful way and actually strengthen the experience, or are we looking at the game that simply tries to do too many things at once? I genuinely hope this game turns out good, and I'm sure it will find its audience, but I do have serious doubts that it will reach the level of a true masterpiece. So in this video I'm going to explain why these doubts exist, I'll lay out all the arguments, and then it's going to be up to you to decide whether you agree or disagree, and as always, I'm happy to have meaningful conversation in the comments. Now, there is one important thing to understand about Crimson Desert. Originally, this game was designed as an MMO, and that matters quite a bit, because the game was announced around 6 years ago, and during that time it gradually evolved from an MMO concept into a single-player action RPG. Development histories like this often leave visible traces. Even when the direction of a project changes, some elements of the original design philosophy can remain inside this final product. So, before we go deeper into Crimson Desert itself, it's worth stepping back and asking a more fundamental question. What actually makes a single-player game experience truly outstanding and unforgettable? In my opinion, the answer is pretty much simple. It's the moment when you can clearly explain why you should care about the game. Once a game gives you a reason to care, it becomes something special. For different players, that reason may vary slightly, but in most cases the core elements are very similar. First of all, it's about characters, the main character you play, and the side characters you encounter along the way. When those characters are charismatic, interesting, maybe tragic, funny or complex, they create emotional attachment. You start worrying about them, you become curious about what will happen next, you want to see how they grow, how they change, and how they deal with the problems placed in front of them. This is when the experience becomes meaningful. Second is going to be about the story built around those characters, which probably makes sense because this is a drive of their development. The situations they face, the tension that builds over time, maybe unexpected twists, difficult decisions, emotional payoffs, and ultimately the conclusion of that journey. Third, it's always about the antagonist. A strong villain can elevate the entire experience, and a good antagonist creates real pressure, forces the main character to evolve, and gives the player a clear emotional motivation. And finally, it's going to be about the world itself. The small details, side quests, random encounters, NPC interactions, moments where the game surprises you with something unexpected, all these elements signal that the world is alive. It's different from one game to another, and in certain cases, even with all of these systems, all of these small things, it still feels empty. Others do it way better. You feel like your actions matter, your decisions matter, your presence inside that world matters. But there's one more thing that ties all of this together, and that is clear identity. Great games usually know exactly what they are and what they want to be. You understand what kind of experience they are trying to deliver. You know what to expect. You don't ask the question, who is this game for? And most importantly, you can explain the essence of the game in 1 or 2 sentences. When that happens, all systems and mechanics inside the game, they support that identity. So now I want to bring several examples of games that I personally consider masterpieces and explain how this principle works. Since Crimson Desert is an open world game, we'll focus on open world examples. And the first example is going to be about Red Dead Redemption 2. You pretty much can describe this game in just one sentence. It is a tragic story about the end of the outlaw era in the Wild West. And everything in the game supports that idea. You have characters who still live by old rules and old values, people who refuse to accept that the world around them is changing. They believe in one last ride, one last plan that will fix everything and give them the life they always wanted. But they are trapped inside the past. Some characters try to change, some grow, but in the end, it still leads to tragedy. And the entire world reinforces that narrative. The level of realism, the attention to details, the slow pacing. You truly feel like you're living inside a world going through a historical transition. The characters are memorable, charismatic, sometimes brutal, sometimes tragic, and they stay with you long after the game ends. The next example that I want to bring here is going to be Elden Ring. And the same thing, you can explain it in pretty much one sentence. This is a brutal world where almost everything is designed and trying just to kill you. Survival and mastery define the experience. Every region feels dangerous and mysterious, every boss fight is unique, every encounter demands attention and skill. The world constantly challenges you. The game pushes you to learn, adapt, improve your build, understand mechanics, and push forward despite repeated failure. There is also a deep lore behind the world, but the core experience revolves around challenge, discovery, and overcoming impossible obstacles. Well, Elden Ring essentially created its own category within open-world games. It is true, but still I believe it deserves attention, because we are speaking about different experiences. The next example that I can't skip is obviously going to be Witcher 3. Yeah. You also can explain it in one sentence. Here you play a character who was literally created to kill monsters, a weapon designed for a broken world, and yet the entire game revolves around moral choices. You meet characters that feel real. Some you love, some you hate, and some are going to surprise you. Side quests, they are not just fillers, they are fully developed stories on its own, and at the end they're going to make a lot of sense. Sometimes they are funny, some of them tragic, and in certain cases just completely insane. Your decisions change outcomes, the world reacts to what you do, and even Geralt himself, who begins as a seemingly unemotional character, gradually reveals deeper layers throughout the story. And the last one example that I want to bring here is going to be Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Single one sentence, again. Here, you're simply a medieval man thrown into the brutality of war. You lose your family, and you're forced to survive. You search for justice and meaning in a harsh world. So, everything in this game aims for realism. You need to eat, you need to train, and you need to practice combat to survive. Your progress feels earned. Your life inside that world feels tangible. Friendships are formed, people betray each other, you save some lives and take others. And this is just the level of realism is incomparable to many other games. So overall, hopefully, by now, I believe the pattern is clear, besides the fact that all of these games are different, designed in an open world, and they share something important, a clear identity. Now let's return to Crimson Desert. Some content creators were able to play the game for about 6 hours and share their impressions. Unfortunately, many of their explanations remain vague, largely because they want to avoid spoilers. Most of the discussion focuses on mechanics and features rather than narrative, but from what I've seen and heard, several people mentioned that the story doesn't appear to be the strongest element of the game. It doesn't look like something particularly deep or groundbreaking. The main character also appears somewhat empty so far, which may be connected to the MMO origins of the project. Of course, we don't yet know how the character development is going to be done within the story. Maybe the narrative will surprise us. Some games take time to build momentum. Even when I was playing Witcher 3, it took me like a couple hours to finally get into it and start to enjoy it fully. But historically speaking, memorable protagonists are one of the pillars of unforgettable single-player games. We need to keep this in mind. Another thing I noticed, it is still unclear who the main antagonist really is. Is it the leader of a rival clan or someone else entirely? Or there is no antagonist at all? Right now, I simply don't see a clear, defined villain driving the entire narrative forward. And finally, we arrive at the biggest question: what exactly is the core identity of this game? Can you describe Crimson Desert based on the trailers and the showcases of the gameplay in one clear sentence? Because me personally right now, I struggle to do that. The game introduces a huge number of mechanics and systems. You have a medieval setting with swords and shields, but at the same time there is magic, you can fly, you can ride dragons, there are mechanical constructs and strange technologies. Combat looks demanding, sometimes approaching Souls-like difficulty. Well, not on the same level, step behind I guess, but still pretty much challenging. So the whole thing begins to feel like a mix of Game of Thrones, Skyrim, Dark Souls, and several other inspirations. Now, I'm not saying that this is automatically a bad thing, but at the same time it doesn't immediately feel like something completely new or clearly defined. From what we've seen so far, exploration and combat appear to be the main strengths of the game, and to be fair, the world looks absolutely stunning. Beautiful landscapes, interesting locations, dynamic encounters, a lot of things. Exploration could generally become one of the highlights here. Some early impressions even suggest that discovering this world might feel similar to the excitement of exploring something like Zelda, I believe. But in a darker and more brutal tone, obviously. Combat also looks impressive. It's fast, dynamic, flashy, with many combinations and tactical possibilities, and it's way deeper than it looks at the first glance. Boss fights appear challenging and engaging, for sure. So in terms of gameplay systems, Crimson Desert definitely looks promising. At the same time, the sheer number of mechanics introduces another concern. When a game tries to include too many systems, there's always a risk that the experience becomes unfocused. Instead of a clear vision, you end up with a collection of impressive features. The world itself appears well designed and alive, so far. NPC reactions, dialogue, voice acting, all of these elements seem solid. I wouldn't say they match the narrative depth of the games mentioned earlier, but they're still respectable. On a decent level, for sure. So, what's the conclusion can we draw from all of this? The level of ambition and attention to detail behind this world absolutely deserves recognition. If the full game maintains the quality that players experience during their first few hours, then the developers have clearly put an enormous amount of work into this project. Exploration, world building, and combat may become the strongest aspect of Crimson Desert. But the real question still remains, is that enough to place this game among the greatest single-player experiences? Personally, I'm not convinced yet, and I would genuinely be happy if it turns out to be wrong, but right now I simply haven't seen all of the elements that usually define truly unforgettable games. Memorable characters, a powerful narrative, extreme challenge, or a crystal clear identity. If the focus of this game is going to be spread too widely across too many ideas, then even with all these strengths, the game might struggle to leave a lasting impact. It could still be a very good game, don't get me wrong, but not necessarily a masterpiece. Of course, the opposite could also happen. The game might eventually find its identity and evolve into a unique sandbox RPG experience. So in the end, we'll have to wait and see how it's going to turn out. I hope I managed to explain my concerns clearly in a meaningful way, and honestly I do hope the developers manage to deliver something special. But based on everything we've seen so far, my expectations remain cautious. And that's it about it. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to see more analysis and fair criticism of the upcoming games, releases, and the industry in general, consider subscribing, hit the like button, leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.